On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others. Welcome to episode 61 of the On the Blue Line podcast. We call this Monday Morning Roll Call, and I am the host and founder of On the Blue Line, Wayne Mulder. This week, a social media hiatus. Monday Morning Roll Call starts now. So, this week for the Positive Police News segment, I actually am just going to give you news. I wanted to bring to your attention, there was a previous article that had come out that the Concerns for Police Survivors, or COPS as the acronym is, and partner organizations and those behind the National Police Week had stated that obviously due to COVID-19 and the related restrictions that they weren't going to be able to do the typical National Police Week event that they do in Washington, D.C. at the National Mall. Typically, every year they have this large event with 30,000 plus first responders, surviving families, and law enforcement supporters who descend on the National Mall in Washington. And it's quite a sight to see. I've never personally been there. I've seen photos and so forth, and I've seen some of the tertiary things that have come from it, but I've never personally had the advantage or the opportunity to go there and see it. But this year, obviously, with COVID-19, determining what we do and how we can do it and pretty much upending our entire world as we knew it, we have to do things differently. So they had come out with a news article that I wanted to let you know that they're going to do it virtually, and it actually falls this week. They said the names of the fallen U.S. law enforcement officers who have died in the line of duty will be formally dedicated on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial during a virtual candlelight vigil, and that's supposed to take place on Wednesday. What I do like is I did want to read this statement from the CEO, Marcia Ferranto, who stood out and said, "We will not let this crisis deter us from honoring the fallen. We plan to march forward in solidarity with a virtual candlelight vigil and the reading of the names that can be watched from anywhere in the world. Then, as the future becomes more certain and the end of the crisis is near, we will begin to make plans for an in-person reading of names to honor our fallen officers." So, what I wanted to let you know is that is actually scheduled for this Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will be sure to link that up in the show notes so that you can go to that. But at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, they're going to do a virtual candlelight vigil this Wednesday, and that's going to be May 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So depending on when you are listening to this episode, if you are actually listening to it on the Monday that it released, I doubt you're listening to it at 5 a.m. Eastern Time, but in case you are, I just wanted to let you know that it is this coming Wednesday that they're going to do that vigil, and I'll be sure to link that up. So this week, I want to talk about something a little bit different. I ended up getting a few texts from some friends, and in those text messages, they asked questions, where you been lately? You okay? First thing on that is, I think that's pretty awesome. I think it's really great that I have friends and have people that are concerned. When they don't hear from you in a little bit, they reach out and, hey, how you doing? And really for people in our line of work, really any line of work, but for those of you in law enforcement, military, nurses, doctors, etc., I would suggest doing that from time to time, right? Just reach out. Reach out. If there's someone you haven't heard from in a while, if you haven't seen a lot of movement from them, maybe just reach out and say, hey, how you doing? You have no idea how much that means and how important that can be to somebody. But fortunately, there really wasn't anything going on that prompted it other than the fact that you've probably noticed I haven't done anything on social media for about a week. Now, this wasn't some great pre-planned event. I didn't sit down and say, hey, I'm going to intentionally take this hiatus from social media. However, as the days started going by, and just to back up for a minute, just so you know that this all of this would not be possible if it wasn't for social media. The podcast, getting it out to people, many of you who follow us, many of you who listen to us, I would never have gotten this message out to you without social media. But pre this podcast, I had very limited social media. I may have had an old Facebook page and maybe an old LinkedIn page just for trying to get a job. But other than those two things, I had very little social media and quite frankly hate it. At the most, I may stalk other accounts, but I never really posted a lot on there and I was never a big fan of social media. One of the things that I find most difficult about doing this is not sitting here and talking. I find that quite easy and I enjoy doing it. but rather it is the need for constantly putting stuff out social media and being active on there in order to create a presence and to push out to people what we are doing. But last week, I decided that, you know what, I'm just going to take a little time and I'm not going to go on social media. So I haven't been on any of the social media accounts in a little over a week now. If you had been trying to reach out to me through those, do not worry. I will respond to you. You haven't been lost. You haven't been forgotten. But I just needed to take a break from it. And, there's something about when it comes to social media, it's easy to get stuck in the proverbial rabbit hole, right? You get in there and you just start looking at things, and before long, you've wasted tons and tons of time. The other thing is sometimes, and especially for me, because I do enjoy politics and current events and a lot of that kind of stuff, just being on social media can be frustrating sometimes, especially when major events and so forth are going on, like right now. And you kind of get stuck in these echo chambers where you get a lot of frustration with current events and news articles and so forth. But it had me thinking that, this social media hiatus that I took, though not intentional in the beginning, was something that was actually very beneficial and I kind of enjoyed. So I wanted to this week just talk about this idea. So social media is not necessarily the problem, right? But it can certainly lead to unhealthy behaviors and an increase in stress and depression and all these different things. Now, when you look at some peer-reviewed articles, which I did in preparing for this, it's controversial. Some are going to say that, yes, this is true. It can lead to increased stress and depression. And others say, well, it might lead to it, but it's minimal at best. The bottom line is, no matter which way you go with these peer-reviewed articles, it comes out with the basic belief that, yes, in general, you can be more stressed and have more mental health concerns due to an increase in social media. So let me just refer to an article that I looked at in Psychology Today. And this was their takeaway on it. They said that low levels of social media usage are associated with better mental health. So as you read through the article, they go into a lot of detail that there's two different groups of social media usage for the purposes that they did in doing this study. And they said that it can be divided into passive and active usage. So passive usage refers to the practice of quietly observing other people's social media. In other words, your social media stalking, which is pretty much the way I was before having this podcast and actually needing a social media presence. I just pretty much stalked other people's pages. But what they found is that there's studies and research that indicates that passive usage can create envy and resentment and this anxiety-provoking fear of missing out, where people are looking at other people's pages and they're not really seeing reality. They're just seeing something that they're like, well, I want that, I need that, whatever the case may be. And in turn, it can lead to some different mental health issues. If, by contrast, you have someone who has active usage and they're just constantly putting up information, that can be a whole different mental health issue with what they call impression management. It's this idea of portraying my fun-filled life for people to comment on and to see. And a lot of times that comes from this desire for approval or validation. And when it doesn't come, then there's a whole bunch of self-doubt and self-loathing and other mental health concerns that take place with that. So there was considerable research that indicates a powerful relationship between physical health and mental health. And we've discussed that before. So this is stepping away from social media for a moment and saying that there is a strong correlation between physical health and mental health. However, what they found is that heavy usage of social media and digital devices can also negatively affect physical health. It can affect sleep. It can affect headaches and so forth from looking at digital screens too long. It can affect just finding time to go out and exercise and to do things that would be beneficial to your physical health. But they wanted to be sure that we all knew that there's also the positive side, which we've learned. Because during COVID-19, obviously, people are not connecting in the same way that they used to connect. And if it wasn't for social media, there's a lot of family members and loved ones that you probably wouldn't be in contact with. So it does allow you to contact other social connections and social capital in dealing with people. But they end it with saying, there's nothing wrong with considering a digital detox, and that's the term they use. And they go on to talk about how maybe it could be a time thing where you pick certain days or certain hours that you don't get on social media. They talk about a space thing where sometimes it could be better to say, okay, this space, be it the dinner table or the bedroom or wherever that space is. They reference some British pubs have social media policies where you don't have phones or laptops at those pubs because it can prevent the communication aspect. And then lastly, alternatives. In other words, maybe instead of social media or instead of doing something on my device, what I'm going to do instead is pursue some old interest, or I'm going to work on a hobby or volunteer or whatever it can be. And then they also talk about the importance of self-introspection that can come from it. And that is really where I ended up going with all of this. So, what I'm suggesting, I'm not saying we're going to get rid of social media. And like I said, with COVID-19 and all this other stuff going on, it serves an important point. And if I didn't have it, I would not be able to get this podcast out to you every week, and I would not be able to communicate with those of you who seem to like this message and are resonating with this message. So it's not going anywhere. But what I do suggest, and what I am suggesting to you this week, is this idea of fasting or taking an intentional break. Be it, you can call it detox or abstinence, whatever you want to call it, but just taking a minute to step away from it and to look at, hey, listen, there's a whole world out there. There's other things going on, and I don't have to be on social media every day. Now, I get some of you listening are like, well, probably from a business sense, you really do, and that could be a valid argument. But since we're small, and since I'm the one that's primarily on there most of the time, every once in a while, I need to take a break from it, and I'm going to. So, social media is a tool. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to present something to the world. But there are dangers that are also associated with it. So, as I've mentioned previously, we have to be willing to take a break from good things that can also be excessive. Food is good for you, but too much of the wrong foods is obviously bad for you, and we all know that, right? So life, it's so often about balance, and sometimes it's about our own peace of mind. But we must be willing to step outside of what society says is normal, or step away from things that we feel we have to do. And we have to be able to make the decision that, you know what? I need to take a break. I want to fast from this. I want to step away from this for a little bit of time. And so don't worry. We are not going anywhere. I'm not advocating getting rid of your social media accounts or throwing your devices away. What I am saying is from time to time, I need to take a break. And I know if I need to take a break, I wanted to present it to you this week because every once in a while, maybe you need to take a break. So don't worry. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be back on social media as needed. And always don't be surprised if we are quiet from time to time. And frankly, I hope the same is true with you. So brothers and sisters, stay safe out there. That does it for this week's Monday Morning Roll Call. I hope to see you next Monday at Roll Call. And in the meantime, I'll see you on the Blue Line.